Sensitive listeners take note, this episode contains conversations about all manner of TERF fuckery. You're going to hear slurs, anti-trans hate, references to suicide, and sexual assault. Take care of yourselves, friends. Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to the Gay Peace Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright. So, back in June, in episode 163, we did an episode with Elle Clayton. She's the Teespring creator who got her designs removed from the site after TERFs mass reported her, and the company made the super shitty decision to bow to them and acknowledge the idea that TERF is some sort of unacceptable slur. And we spent a little bit of the episode talking about TERFs themselves and how dangerous they can be, but I think we're kind of overdue for a deep dive. And if you're not familiar, TERF's an acronym that stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. And you'll hear more on the definitions later, but for now, just know these are a particularly nasty and hateful group of people who are absolutely hell-bent on excluding trans people, not just from certain social circles, but from public life in general. They regularly bully and harass trans people, even going as far as goading people into suicide. And I was reminded of this by an article I read in Forbes, of all places. The article is called "Lesbians Want a Church of Their Own and IRS Approves." And my initial reaction was like, okay, sweet, lesbian church. I can get into that because it kind of sounds like one of those stunts the Satanic Church pulls to point out the absurdity of the privilege that religious organizations get in our society. But it's not as good as all of that. And it's actually pretty awful. This place is literally a TERF church, the Pussy Church of Modern Witchcraft, which if I didn't know what it was, I would be super stoked on the name. According to their website, here's who can join. All women and girls are welcome to join Pussy Church as congregants. We also need women who can serve Pussy Church in growing and strengthening our congregation. If you are able to offer your time, skills, money, or other resources in support of Pussy Church, please contact us. A woman is an adult female human. A girl is a minor female human. The Pussy Church serves women and girls only. Males are not entitled to participate regardless of how they identify. We expressly reject the concepts of gender identity, transgenderism, and gender as being meaningful to defining what a woman or girl is. So fucking gross. Make no mistake about it, friends. TERFs are dangerous. These are not simply people who have a different opinion. These aren't harmless, ineffective bigots who just scream at their computer monitors and we can all laugh. These people want us dead, and many of them have said as much. They bully us off of social media. They try to get us fired from our jobs for speaking up against them and cry victimhood when we push back. And a dear friend of mine, unfortunately, has lots and lots of experience dealing with these kinds of people, and she is joining me today to talk about who TERFs are, what they do, how dangerous they are, and most importantly, how we can fight them. Danielle Moscato, my dear, welcome back to the show.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
So I imagine that these folks are people you've been dealing with, at least in some capacity, since you came out. But I get the sense that it really happened when you made this tweet that went viral and you just kind of got exposed to a broader group of people. And it just seems to have sort of gone exponential since then. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience with these kind of folks and how it started and where you're at?
Sure. So these people are really nothing new. Ignorance about trans identities and denial of trans identities is certainly something that's been around since trans people really started to have any kind of public visibility. Anti-trans people are certainly nothing new to somebody who's involved in atheism activism or any kind of queer activism or anything like that either. I think it's kind of an interesting point that they started a church about this, because that gives them, not necessarily in the UK where this is, but at least in this country, there are a lot of certain protections that you get for calling yourself a church as far as First Amendment rights. Again, this is nothing new. Plenty of churches say terribly anti-scientific things all of the time and are allowed to believe whatever they want. When they start trying to force their beliefs into public policy, obviously that creates a problem for the rest of us who want to base our public policy off of science. But what makes TERFs especially vicious and especially problematic for queer people is that these people, even though in this particular case they have set this up under a church, most of the time they try to argue scientifically that trans people don't exist, that this is a mental illness, or that we're just doing this to make their lives worse in some way.
Which is an interesting point of view, and by interesting I mean horrifying, because
right.
like that's literally saying that like our existence somehow takes away from you, which is
right.
Yeah.
And we've heard that before too, right? I mean, when you're talking about marriage equality, this is the thing too, is that it's like you can't get married because it's against my beliefs, is another way of saying I think it's just disgusting. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that anti-gay people use that excuse that they don't understand it. They think it's gross or something like that, and therefore other people shouldn't be allowed to do it. And again, that also is an argument that's not unfamiliar to queer people, that if the normalized version of how people act based on heteronormative principles of a Judeo-Christian society says that you're not supposed to do something, that there are many decades of precedent for suppressing that with legal channels, inappropriately, but that's how they do it, is theocratically like that. And in this case, it's interestingly people who tend not to be super religious and often tend to be pretty anti-heteronormative, anti that Judeo-Christian kind of mindset already, but they are agreeing with Christians, the evangelical Christians. I'm not trying to say that all Christians are like that, but the ones who are anti-queer, they're aligning themselves and using theocratic channels to try to cause us harm. It doesn't do any harm to a cisgender person for a transgender person to exist. I don't know why these TERFs focus so much on these perceived hypothetical things that could happen. That's really, I think, the main difference between maybe not the main difference between conservatives and everybody else, but one of the major differences, I think, is that a lot of people on that side of the fence have a lot of trouble separating out hypothetical victims from actual victims, and they tend to put them on the same playing field. They'll say, like, what if somebody pretends to be trans in order to go into a women's bathroom and assault somebody? And it's like, I mean, that's a hypothetical possibility, sure.
Right.
Like, can make stuff up all day long. But the fact is, trans people are at very high risk of assault when they use public bathrooms, because this debate is something that has grown to national, international proportions, and they're making a deal out of this where there wasn't really a deal before. People who are trans have been using public bathrooms our entire lives. I guarantee every single person listening to this has used the bathroom alongside a trans person without knowing it at some point. Just statistically speaking, it's happened. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect you in any way, unless you choose to let it affect you by being offended by it. I don't know what TERFs think happens in public bathrooms that, like, they need to be aware of other people at all, let alone afraid of them. That, I mean, when I go to the bathroom, I go into the stall and I do my thing, and then I leave after washing my hands, right? I'm not like interacting with other people in there. That would be out of place, Yeah,
I think it comes from, and this is me doing the thing where I'm like trying to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. I think the place the fear comes from is a genuine fear. I think it's misdirected, because I think what it is so, as queer folks, we have to fight for our space in society, right? And especially queer women. And so they've carved out this space for themselves in whatever space they have. And they see trans people as interlopers, as invading their space and being threatening to that space. And so, I think it's justified to be afraid of things that actually do threaten that space. But like trans people aren't one of them.
Right.
So I'm interested in hearing about some of your own personal experiences with this kind of thing, because I think there are people who maybe experience a little bit of nastiness here and there online. I'm one of them. I've had people make really awful comments on YouTube videos that, and I've had, nasty messages sent to me on Twitter, but it's not something that is like relentless day in and day out. And so generally speaking, it's easy enough for me to let that stuff roll off my back, because it's not something I'm dealing with on a daily basis. I'm not being piled on top of or anything like that. But I get the sense that kind of has been your experience. So can you tell me a little bit about your personal experience with these kind of folks?
Yes, sure. And I want to start off by saying that I'm really sorry that you've had to deal with that. It's not my fault, of course, but I'm sorry that those people are mean to you like that.
Thank you.
And it's cruel, and we shouldn't tolerate it. Ostensibly, social media platforms don't tolerate it. They all have terms of service where they talk about how harassing people for gender identity is not something that they allow on their platforms, yet they actually do in reality. But we can come back to that. But,
and mass, not just not just on a case by case basis, but en masse. But yes, go on.
But you shouldn't have to deal with that, and that's why that's part of the reason that I do the activism that I do, is so that people like you don't have to deal with this stuff. But I don't know if I necessarily agree, or I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo your lived experience here, but I don't know that it's actually necessarily worse to get a lot more of this stuff than somebody who gets it occasionally, just because you do get desensitized to it after a while.
That makes sense.
Sometimes it breaks through that and it just overwhelms you, and that is not good either. But you develop systems for dealing with it and coping mechanisms. And if you're somebody who has to deal with it a lot as part of your job, you can look at it that way. You can separate yourself from it and say, I'm an activist. This is my job. This is evidence that I'm going in the right direction. When the people that I disagree with ideologically hate me, that means that I'm doing something right. And, you have a network of people who support you, who see this visibly because of your visibility in your job, who want to help and who help report things and get things taken down faster and stuff like that. It's not necessarily harder to get a lot of this. In fact, I think it's harder to get some of it and not have a platform where you can ask for help and not have all of these coping mechanisms and all this experience with it, because you don't know what to do. And that's something that really concerns me a lot, is, the high school student who just came out as trans, and these TERF armies latch onto them and just launch attacks against them, and they don't know what to do about it. They don't know how to handle it. And that person is a lot more at risk of suicide than I am. In my, this is hypothetical, but this happens all the time. Just because I have systems in place for this, and a lot of people who are experiencing this for the first time don't. And that's a problem too. And we can talk a little bit about some of those systems later and what they look like and how to implement them for yourself on a smaller basis, if that's something you want to do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's actually a really important point that you bring up, in that, you and I are both people with platforms, right? Like, we're podcasters, we're activists, we have massive groups of friends all over the country. So like, when something goes bad, I think generally speaking, you and I know that like there's a group of people that we can count on to have our backs, and that like, unless somebody like physically comes to hurt me, like generally speaking, I'm going to be okay. Even if it hurts, even if it doesn't feel good, like on a grand scale, I know people have my backs. But like, you bring up the high school student who's just come out as trans, and there's the news story that's been going around of these parents at this school threatening this kid, and that kid doesn't have the sort of support networks that we have. So that's actually a really good call out. I don't know that I had thought about things on that level. Maybe maybe that's a blind spot that I had. So that's a good call out.
Yeah, thanks. And I want to help people with that too. I hope we have some time later in the episode to talk about some of those things and things that we can do to help individuals who are experiencing this kind of stuff. But you had asked, I don't want to stray too far from your question, I'm sorry. You had asked about my personal history with this kind of stuff. So on International Women's Day 2 years ago, I sent out a tweet I don't have it pulled up here at the moment, but I think I have it memorized. It was something along the lines of some women have penises. If you don't agree or if you don't like it or something like that, you can suck my dick. And then I tagged it International Women's Day, and a lot of people were really upset about that. But I'm not sorry about that. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it again in those words, but it's true. And as far as the reference there to suck my dick, I'm asexual. I just want to say, if people didn't know that about me, I talk about that publicly all the time. That was not like a serious invitation.
Well, right. And it's sad that you have to point that out, right? Because if literally anybody else in any context was like, suck my dick, they would know exactly what we mean, right? That means like, go fuck yourself. Like that same sort of like, just go to hell with your silly ideas, right? But like but because we're trans people in the context, like we have to constantly explain ourselves when we say stuff like that. It's gross. But yeah.
So I get this all the time from people who there's a screenshot of that went viral. I think Milo Yiannopoulos posted it or something. Or either he posted that one or he posted a different one. It doesn't matter. Anyway, I had to write a note about this. I'm reading it off of Facebook right now. So I wanted to clear up some misinformation that was going around about me. So I posted this March 15th, 2017. It's on my Facebook. If you just search for Danielle Moscato on Facebook and you want to read the whole thing, it's in my notes on my profile. But so I posted this list of 10 things that are incorrect about me that people say to attack me. And one of them is about that tweet. So I'm just going to read that one. It says, saying suck my dick in response to misogyny is a quote from Demi Moore's character Lieutenant Jordan O'Neill in the 1997 Ridley Scott movie G.I. Jane. It has the same meaning as bite me, go fly a kite, go jump off a bridge, kiss my ass, go to hell, or any number of other similar retorts. Yes, it's crass. That's the point. Yes, it's graphic and a direct reference to a certain part of the body. Again, that's the point. It's not a rape threat. Seriously, listen to yourselves. I have been accused of threatening to rape people for saying suck my dick. And it's like, first of all, that wasn't like to anyone specific. It was to people who disagree that some women have penises. In other words, anti-trans people. So I don't really care about making them happy or feel comfortable because they're trans-misogynistic and they're bigots. But I want to make sure that people understand that wasn't a threat. In addition to being asexual, I'm also a pacifist. Like I would never threaten anybody anyway. It's just kind of ridiculous to me. But yeah, so that made a bunch of people unhappy. I took some screenshots in preparation for this podcast that I can – oh gosh, where to start? Oh boy. So just the kind of stuff that people say to me online. I'll just read some randomly. Honestly, hope you get cancer. If you have XY chromosome. Oh, by the way, sorry, there's going to be some stuff coming up that might be triggering for people. So might want to prepare yourself to hear some negative, hateful things. I'm
going to, as part of my intro at the very top, I'm going to include trigger warnings for that.
Wonderful. Good to hear. Yeah. So, well, okay, here's one. So I posted, and this was honestly not the best way to go about it because it's kind of inviting this crap, but I tweeted once, I just want one day, just one single day where I check my notifications and multiple people haven't called me a fag. And like immediately, of course, I don't know why I did that because it's just asking for it, but immediately somebody just responded fag. And like another person said, you're a man. You may wish it were otherwise, but you're a man. Easiest way not to be called a fag is to stop being a fag. It's just, this goes on. There's a whole bunch. Mm-hmm. There's worse ones than this too. But please just kill yourself. My brain cells are just fucking burning. You're a fucking male, not a female. You have a fucking cock. When you wear push out, I don't know what that means. Kill it before it lays eggs goes another one. Kill it. Let's see. You spelled. Well, hold on a second. Let me find a better one. Somebody goes, what the fuck is it? Yeah, I mean, anyway, you get the picture. Yeah. So I get this kind of stuff every day, you know? I just went through my screenshot collection. I keep these because I report them all. Not all of them, I should say. It's too time consuming to do that. But the ones that are especially egregious, the ones that dox me, the ones that are relentless about it, I take more steps to get their stuff removed. And it's frustrating. It takes up a lot of my day that I don't like spending on that, but I don't really know what else to do about that. It's just something that goes with the territory. And like I was saying before, if you're pissing off those types of people, that's a sign that you're doing something right about it.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
Yeah. So with these TERFs, though, I think I don't know. A lot of them seem to be based in the UK that I've noticed. I'm not sure why that is, but something interesting happened. I don't think I have a link to it handy, so I'm not going to try to find it on the air. But there was a service station in southern England along the highway there where somebody posted a picture of me from 2012. So this was a few years before I came out. I still had a beard at that time. I was wearing a shirt and a tie. And they posted a picture of me in the women's bathroom at this service station and said, if this new law passes, somebody like this person will be able to come into your bathroom and you won't be able to do anything about it. So you should call such and such, representative and say you're against this law. And somebody sent this to me. They're like, did you know this? Like, it's, because it had my name, so they were able to find me online. And they're like, did you know this is up here? And I was like, no, but it doesn't really surprise me, Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is about the UK where there's so many TERFs that have a foothold there. But it's a big part of their politics and their political debate at the moment. And they're starting to put some protections in place to help trans people, and I think that's a great thing. I'm really proud of the people who are behind that, and I hope that they have great success with it. But the people who are against it are pushing back hard. And
that's I always kind of talk about the double-edged sword of trans visibility. Like, the visibility is cool because it means we're part of the conversation. People realize that we exist, and people with good hearts, get involved and try to help and try to do something about it. But that also increases the backlash. So it's like, those of us who have platforms and followers and that kind of stuff, like, a lot of times we're the ones pushing the visibility thing, but we're also typically not the ones who face the worst of the backlash. So it makes it difficult. And I think it's worth pointing out that, it's obviously news to no one that shitty people exist on the internet and that shitty people exist in the world. But what I don't think is generally known is that these people are very well organized, right? This is not just a random smattering of people who are being mean on the internet. Like, these are people who are very, very well organized. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So a lot of people, for some reason, or not for some reason, I think it's pretty clear why, a lot of people assume that evangelical Christians are the worst enemy of trans people. And that is true, probably more so on a legislative level. But on a day-to-day level, frankly, a lot more of my distress and the distress of a lot of trans people that I talk to about this comes from TERFs. And TERFs are a relatively obscure part of the whole spectrum of this. Most people on the street have no idea what a TERF is, I think. But these people, they're organized in forums where they discuss ways to harass people. They tend to be better about hiding their identities or using pseudonyms. They tend to be more savvy with computer stuff. In other words, when it comes to like doxing people and stuff like that, they're better at finding that information. They're better at disseminating it. And they're more dangerous to people in that way day to day. When it comes to making laws, they don't have very much power because nobody knows who they are, but they do cause a lot of distress for trans people because of their direct actions online. Most of the cyber harassment that I get, most of the doxing, actually so far 100% of the doxing has come from TERFs, not from evangelical Christians. And I'm not saying evangelical Christians are not a problem for trans identities. They are, but the reason that we talk about TERFs disproportionate to kind of how many TERFs there are is that they're particularly vicious and particularly harmful to trans people in ways that evangelical Christians aren't. Um, they do a better job at trolling. In other words, hiding that they are TERFs until later in the conversation. I've had some people on my Facebook that I was friends with who were like, I do kind of have. I have a Facebook page where I encourage people I don't know personally to follow me. I also have a Facebook profile where I have followers on that, but I also have, friends on that. And I only befriend people on Facebook that I know in person decently well. And I've had people on my Facebook friends list who are TERFs who are feeding information back to these forums so that they can harass me better. And like that, that's no good. That feels really awful and it's disturbing. But like, if you have evangelical Christians on your Facebook page, you probably know that,
Right.
If you have
they're not
TERFs
slinking around in the shadows,
right,
doing stuff behind your back.
And part of the reason for that, I think, is that TERFs, and if you go to like Reddit on Gender Critical, there's a subreddit called Gender Critical that is a forum for TERFs. They don't like to call themselves TERFs. They say that they're gender critical, but the name of the sub is Gender Critical. If you go on there, you see all sorts of stories about people discovering that they're anti-trans and that they're TERFs, and finding other like hidden groups of people, and they have like secret code words that they use to talk about this, so that they don't have to refer to it openly, because it's kind of similar to like white supremacy type of stuff. They know that people are very unaccepting of this attitude and that they have to talk about it in their little private circles and quietly among their friends, because if they just start posting anti-trans stuff on their personal Twitter, on their personal Facebook, that they're going to lose a lot of friends, that they might have job opportunities, it's going to cause problems for them publicly, and they know that. They know that it's a shameful position to have, that society is not accepting of anti-trans views more and more every day. And unlike evangelical Christians, they hide their hate for trans people because they don't want those negative consequences. And to me, that's actually encouraging. That tells me that they are aware that this is not acceptable, and they're trying to give it legitimacy, and they try to give it legitimacy all sorts of different ways. They don't have numbers, and they're aware of that as far as reaching a critical mass of being able to talk about it openly. They sometimes try to bring in pseudoscience to talk about it, but again, they can't really reference any journals or anything like that because science disagrees with them on this. But that's true of a lot of religious beliefs and other cult-like beliefs like that.
I want to talk for a little bit about how we actually fight these folks, because you brought up earlier that these folks are really, really internet savvy on a level that a lot of folks aren't, right? And that's part of how they stay organized. So like, I made reference at the top of the episode to Elle Clayton, the creator on Teespring, who had her t-shirt campaign taken down. It said "fuck TERFs," and it was mass reported, right? And it doesn't just get mass reported because there's like an entire group of like a shit ton of people independently watching for this kind of thing to pounce on it, right? Like you were talking about, these people, like they lurk on subreddits and their own forums and I'm sure Facebook groups. And so like, they share this sort of information with each other and it goes and gets mass reported. So they, they take advantage of badly written algorithms, one, but they also, I think, take advantage of just plain ignorance when they have a group of people saying like, hey, we're really offended and hurt by this insulting slur. And you have somebody who has to make this decision who doesn't know what a trans person is, doesn't know what a TERF is, but still has to make a decision of how to do this. Like part of that, I think, is me wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt, but also like, I think that's legitimately true in a lot. Like they're taking advantage of ignorance. And so like practical boots on the ground tips, like how do we fight this stuff?
Yeah. So the number one thing is do not engage. If a TERF is harassing you online, do not reply to them. As soon as you understand that you're talking to a TERF, stop communicating with them, because that's what they want. They want to piss you off. They want to waste your time. They want to rile you up and upset you. and cause you distress. That's their goal. I've read this like actually stated by TERFs. They want us to be depressed. They want us to kill ourselves. They want us to have emotional distress over what they're doing. And if you talk to them, you're feeding into that. And I know it's really tempting, but don't do it. What you should do if a TERF is harassing you is report it, take a screenshot of it, ask your friends to report it. If you can do that in a friends only post, if you have a wide enough network of people who will help you with that, that's one way to do it. Another way you can do that, if you would like to be public about it, you're going to, of course, invite additional harassment. I'm not saying that you're inviting it. It's not your fault that this is happening.
Right. But we know it's going to happen.
But if your response to being harassed online is to take a screenshot and then to post another post saying, please report this person, they know that, that they got to you, and it's going to encourage them. But it's also going to help other people get that content taken down. So, there are other ways that you can ask for assistance in helping get that stuff taken down. I would like to mention an idea that I had that I've talked briefly publicly about before, but I would like to see if you're interested in working with me on getting this actually launched. So there's a hashtag that I thought people could use to ask for help in getting this kind of content reported. Now, to be clear, this is content that we all agree in good faith actually does violate the terms of service of these different platforms. So this is not mass reporting in order to abuse algorithms in a way that they weren't intended. This is mass reporting of actually harassing content that should not be on these platforms that does legitimately violate terms of service, and we're just helping to notify the various platforms that this is going on. So one thing that you need in order for this to work is a whole bunch of people to help report the same content in a relatively short window of time. So if you don't have a lot of followers on your social media, or if you need a wider platform than the number that you currently have, one way is to tag in other activists and have us spread this on our platforms. So you can do that by just different activists and seeing if they'll retweet you or share your post or something. That's one way to do it. But I thought another way that might be more efficient would be to use a hashtag that we all can look for and find content that appears to be harassing and report it. So I thought if we use a hashtag like tag us in, tag in people who are willing to help. And this doesn't just have to be other trans people. And in fact, it would probably be better if this was not just other trans people, right, but allies who want to help too. This is something free, easy, quick that you can do to actually help a trans person in distress who's being harassed online. Search for that hashtag, tag us in, look for trans people who are being harassed and asking for help, and find those posts and report them. And I've actually already been talking to we're not very far along in this process yet, but Del Harvey, who's the VP of Trust and Safety at Twitter, and I were talking about ways that we can help fix some of their algorithm problems to get this to make progress with helping to get this stuff removed. Currently on Twitter, and this isn't limited to Twitter, but it's especially a problem on Twitter, I think. There's this issue of if you report something, you'll get a reply back from their automated system that it doesn't violate their terms of service, even though it pretty clearly does. And you can appeal that. But the more times they get reports about the same thing in a short period of time from different people, the more likely they are to actually remove it in a timely manner and to suspend the person who did it, or even delete their account if it's sufficiently bad. But none of this stuff is okay. You don't have to deal with harassment, and you certainly don't have to deal with harassment alone. And we want to help you, and allies want to help you. And if you're having problems with people harassing you for your gender, use hashtag tag us in and ask for help, and we'll come and help you. I've got a couple of other people who are possibly on board with helping me get this going. When I tweeted about this Laura Jane Grace from Against Me expressed interest in helping getting this going, and so did Monica Lewinsky. And I think that this has potential to. I'm not trying to name drop. I'm just saying we're working on getting this going, and the whole point of this is visibility with a platform of people, because this works a lot better when a lot of people are aware of this hashtag and are using it. So yeah, I think this is something that we can do that would be easy, that would be effective, and if you'd like, we can launch this together and hashtag tag us in, and we'll come and help you report this harassing content. Yeah, so that's one thing that I think that you can do. But the main piece of advice is, as I was saying before, don't engage and report it. Make sure you document what's going on, and do know also that you can appeal those violations if they're coming in. If they're being returned as this is not a violation, I mean. But yeah, I think the other main thing is that if you can have if you're having a lot of issues with dealing with that emotionally, it's okay to ask for a friend that you trust to help you. I don't necessarily recommend sharing your password, because you're not supposed to do that. But if you're comfortable doing that and you want a friend to help you report all this content, if you're being attacked and you're getting a bunch of stuff in a row, it can be very harmful to look at that stuff over and over. And especially if you're at risk of being doxxed, I do understand that you kind of have to look at it, because you have to take action if something's going on. But you don't have to do that yourself. There are people who would love to help you, people who support you, and don't lose hope. And it's going to be okay. It passes. These people feed off of attention, and if you don't give that to them, it sounds horrible, but they will move on to somebody else. And our hope is that their numbers dwindle enough, and that it's not really a problem for anybody anymore. But we'll get there at some point.
Yeah. I'm interested in the idea of not engaging, because I tend to go back and forth on that argument, because I do think it is important to be, visibly in opposition to things like that. I guess you don't necessarily have to engage with TERFs to do that, but just sort of a general philosophy, I guess. Like there's never engage, there's always engage, and there's like a gaping chasm of space in between. And, part of me thinks that sometimes engaging maybe accomplishes something, but like, I don't know, I guess the person you're engaging has to be at least somewhat engaging, and has to be at least acting somewhat in good faith for that to work. Cause I mean, I've had those conversations with people that were ignorant and hateful, but maybe I saw a little crack in the armor a little bit, that like, I might at least be able to have a conversation with this person. And those conversations can be valuable if you have the capacity to do that sort of emotional labor. But I guess the point is, like, those aren't the kinds of people we're talking about, right? We're not talking about people interested in a good faith discussion whose minds could be changed. Like, these are people whose entire purpose is to distract you, hurt you, and unfortunately sometimes see you dead.
Yeah. One thing that you can do, and I should mention, I do occasionally engage with people, but it is difficult. I mean, that's part of what trolling is that they try to distort or to hide the fact that they're anti-trans in order to waste your time and to rile you up. And as a result of them intentionally hiding their intentions, it's difficult to know if you're talking to somebody who is, I mean, and this is Poe's law, right? It's difficult to know if you're talking to somebody who is actually trying to learn information about what it is to be trans and is ignorant and wants your opinion on it, or if they're just trying to upset you and use screenshots of what you're saying to take back to their forums and to pick you apart and all that stuff. I mean, I'm not going to name the forum, but there's a forum online it's a troll forum, and they have like a thread about me. It's something like 36 pages long at this point, hundreds and hundreds of posts, where they have picked apart like hundreds of my Facebook posts, of my tweets, examining them, trying to find like things that I didn't really say, so that they can figure out better ways to harass me, and they believe that it's kind of strangely. It feels really weird to look at this. I read it because I need to know what kind of information they're putting out there about me. If a lot of the doxing that's happened to me has come from these people, but it's just fascinating how they strategize about how best to harass me based on things that I've said. And when you talk to them, you're giving them more information about how to do that.
Right. And
so when you're talking to those kind of people, because they present themselves to you as somebody who's just curious. And I mean, that's what trolling is. That's what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So if you feel very confident that you're talking to somebody in good faith, if it's somebody you know or a friend of a friend, there's a much lower chance that they're doing that. But if it's somebody that you don't know, and especially if there are some certain giveaway things, like if their username has XY in it somewhere, or XX, that's a really common thing that you'll see TERFs put in their handles or in their Twitter bios or something like that. If you see any references to GC, that's short for gender critical. It's a pretty good chance you're talking to a TERF. And go, before you engage with somebody, if you really want to engage with them, go to their Facebook, go to their Twitter, look at their timeline. If they only have like 30 followers, if they only have a few tweets, it's probably not their main account. They probably made it to troll people. If they have a bigger account history, scroll down, look through some of their stuff. If they're posting about gender stuff, and they're linking to things that are obviously anti-trans, or if you dig in a little bit, if they appear to be anti-trans, don't engage with them. Those are trolls. Mm-hmm. But I think just have a little bit of sense about how you go about it and be selective in who you engage with. And if you get the impression that somebody is not doing this in good faith, which is not too hard to learn, and if somebody is exposed to new information, that's good information. If it's from nature or science or something like that, if you're linking somebody to an appropriate source and they absorb it and they change the way that they word things from then on and so on, it's a better chance that you're talking to somebody who's actually trying to learn. Mm-hmm. But use your brain. You can figure it out, but don't be afraid to stop talking to somebody if you start getting a sense that they're just trolling you. Yep. And I don't want people to put themselves under unnecessary distress trying to educate people. That's an admirable goal, and activism is very important in helping people understand this stuff, but I don't want anybody to get hurt either. And that's what they're trying to do, and they're good at it. So be aware of that.
I think so. I think the number one rule is to understand that you don't have a moral obligation to engage. Like, you're not a bad person because you choose to not engage these people. Even if you think it's someone who is arguing in good faith, sometimes it still takes a lot, because you're trying to convince someone on one level or another that you're a human being, right? And that's exhausting to do. It's important work, but if it's not work that you feel okay doing, you're not a bad person for stepping away from that, shooting over a link to like, okay, I really can't do this right now, but like, here's an article, like that kind of stuff. That is okay. So there is no moral obligation to engage. I think that's the number one most important rule, is that like, you should feel comfortable walking away at any time. Feel comfortable unfollowing, feel comfortable unfriending, and feel comfortable blocking if you feel like that's what you need to do to keep yourself safe, to keep your social media experience a good one. All of those things are okay. And then I think the number two rule after that is, if you do, for the love of God, be careful, because you never know who you're talking to. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah. And I will say, I tend to take the approach of very rarely blocking people. I tend not to do it unless somebody is like absolutely upfront about misgendering me and like calling me the kinds of names that I was reading off earlier from those posts. Those people I will block. But people who just don't really get it or aren't interested in learning very much about it, I tend to think they'll pick up stuff. They'll learn if they keep reading my posts. I don't want to block them and deprive people of the opportunity to grow if they're interested enough to follow me in the first place. But you do have to be careful about that. And I also want to say, over the years, there have been quite a number of people where I was on the fence about blocking them because I knew them already, or because they were a friend of a friend, or because they seemed to be asking sometimes actually decent questions, and I didn't want to just cut them off like that. Every single time I have said, you know what, this is it, I'm blocking this person. I have never, ever regretted that, ever.
Yep. Me either.
I used to be much less liberal with the block button than I am now. I still don't consider myself liberal with it, but I'm much more than I used to be, and I wish that I had done that sooner, and I don't regret it at all every time that I've done it. So if somebody is causing you distress, even if they're not like intentionally hurting you, even if they're not doxing you, it's okay to block them. It's okay to do that. You don't have to put yourself through this stuff. I'm not trying to victim blame here. They are the one doing this to us.
Right.
It's just so clear. But you don't have to take it if you there's no moral obligation to like put yourself through that in order to educate people who are not actively seeking to be educated about it. Those are the people we should be focusing on at every level of activism, are the people who actively want to understand better. And if you're being tricked into talking to somebody who isn't actively seeking to understand better but wants to waste your time, that's one thing. But if you're talking to somebody who isn't even really trying to learn, if that's not explicitly their reason for talking to you about this stuff, don't waste your time, and don't let them upset you, just block them.
I agree wholeheartedly. Well, Danielle, my friend, it has been an awesome conversation. I hope it's been valuable to the folks listening, for equipping ourselves against this kind of stuff, learning more about what's going on, how we can fight it, how we can deal with it. So thank you so much for your time. Do you still do your podcast, right? You'd plug all of the things.
Yeah, I'm seeking a new co-host at the moment. So if anyone is interested in that or has suggestions for who they think might be a good co-host for me, I'm definitely interested in trying out guest co-hosts. I've done that a few times already. You're welcome to contact me if that's something you're interested in doing. My contact info is just at Danielle Muscato, DANIELLEMUSCATO on all the different social media platforms. And then the podcast itself is called the Resist Podcast, at Resist Podcast on Twitter. It's also on iTunes. If you just search for me, it'll come up. I also just want to put in a quick plug for my Patreon. That's my main source of income and how I pay my bills as an activist. I'm a writer. I'm a public speaker. As I mentioned before, I do a podcast. All of this is made possible by the people who support my Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/Danielle Muscato, you can make a pledge on there. Even if it's just $1 a month, it really helps me out. And that's how I can afford to give speeches for free all around the country, because it's paid for by you guys. I'm in St. Louis right now, and I've been on the road. I've driven 3,000 miles in the last 3 weeks, so I'm ready to go home. But that's all done through Patreon, through you guys. So thank you for supporting me if you do already, and if you don't already, please think about it. Patreon.com/Danielle Muscato, or even if you just want to talk to me, I love hearing from you guys. Feel free to reach out to me on any platform, and we can talk about whatever you'd like.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. If you think what we do here is important, please share this around to your friends. Search the Gaytheist Manifesto on Facebook and Twitter to find us there. I'm at Gaytheist Callie on Twitter, and you can email us at podcast@thegaytheistmanifesto.com. We're part of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We're a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. If you want to support the show, the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/thegaytheist manifesto. Make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. If that's not on the cards, you can give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share us around to your friends. It all helps and it all makes a difference. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.